And we have actually Senator Braun, a senator from Indiana, a freshman senator. But Senator, thank you so much for joining us this morning on Fox and Friends. Your state of Indiana is making some progress. Give us an update on what Indiana is doing and how the federal government is helping.
So Indiana just yesterday decided to get back into business. Governor Eric Holcomb, Indy was a top 15 potential spot of a flare-up. It's a top 15 metro area. Done a great job. This is a state that is the highest manufacturing per capita place in the country, made up of entrepreneurs, a great business climate. So here especially, that pent-up demand you've been seeing has been in play from the get-go. And I was so glad he decided to get things back to what I've called a smart restart. So we are in that direction.
Senator, can you tell me what is the plan in your state, do you know, for, attempting to keep this curve flat? And if you do start to see a spike in numbers at all, do you know if there's a plan in place for that?
So since I've been back March 26, I've talked to so many business owners, small, medium, and large. They know it's in their own best interest not to backslide. And we know that what you can do is fairly simple, that you've got within your own control until we get herd immunity and vaccines. So I think the governor wanted to make sure that businesses across the state were going to pay attention to what's put us in a good spot and then take the risk that we all have to, because if we keep going down the pathway of what we've been on, justified to tamp the disease down, you risk permanent demand and supply destruction that I talked about on a couple floor speeches before we left. And we're on that cusp. If we don't start doing what you're seeing governors across the country mostly doing, we'll have issues much larger to contend with, bankruptcies and a whole cascade of things. That's why I'm glad to see most governors are sensibly reopening county by county. Indy and the metro counties are different from most of the other counties in our state, and I think our governor made the right move.
Yeah, Senator, you said the right phrase. I mean, it's in their own best interest to be responsible to continue the pathway. We just showed a graphic, I'm not sure if you saw it, of what Indiana is doing. Masks are recommended but not mandated, and retail and commercial businesses can open up in certain percentages. A reasonable reopening, respecting citizens to be personally responsible and exercise common sense. But I got to get your take back to Capitol Hill. Nancy Pelosi and Democrats are now eyeing a $1 trillion additional Phase 4 relief package, but they say it'll be geared toward helping states. There's concern that this looks a lot like a blue state bailout, that there are states that have been fiscally mismanaged for a long time trying to take advantage of this moment. What is your take from the Senate perspective, from Indiana's perspective, of yet another bailout?
You know, coming from a state like ours where grassroots, you appreciate the productive side of the economy, which in a little over a year that I've been there, I've not seen hardly any regulations a Democrat would like to get rid of, thinks government is the way things work. So we're going to be real cautious. We all knew we had to do somewhat what we did. The point going forward is it's an opportunity for people that believe in the top-down, the larger government, to start talking about another $1 trillion, including putting money in there for state governments that have their own ability to borrow money and raise revenues. And this certainly shouldn't be a way that they can get bailed out for the way they poorly manage their own state governments. Much different atmosphere when we get back. Maybe some errors and omissions. Agriculture, I'm worried about because it was the only weak part of our economy going into it. But we need to be careful that we don't let the other side use this as an opportunity. To me, it's a preview for the American public of what it would look like if that worst case scenario would occur this November. You can see bureaucracy, big government, top down. That's what we'd have more of.
Now, Senator, I got to ask you about the Paycheck Protection Program, because the PPP was sold to businesses in part as a loan to help cover their payroll. But the IRS late Thursday issued guidance saying that now those businesses, they're not going to be able to deduct their personnel expenses. That's going to be a new tax on them that they did not know that was going to be there. What are you going to do about that?
Jason, You're not going to believe this. I was on that small business task force group, all of us. That was the only glimpse I've had of what a bipartisan effort would be about. I mentioned that. Being a business person, I said forgiveness of a liability constitutes income. We got to make sure that that is protected against. Of course, it's in the broad language of the PPP. This again shows you how the bureaucracy, the agencies that have to implement and interpret, have their fingerprint on it. That's going to get cleared up, because that would be an abomination if, after doing all this, business owners would have to declare that as income. I'll speak up about that. I was the one that warned against it, to get it into the general language. That should not happen if we stick with the spirit of what was in the law itself.
Yeah, that would be devastating to a lot of business owners out there. Let's talk about China for a second and get your opinion on this. A new 15-page dossier that shows China intentionally hid evidence about the coronavirus outbreak. We have an excerpt here, and this says, quote, it states that to the endangerment of other countries, the Chinese government covered up news of the virus by silencing or disappearing doctors who spoke out, destroying evidence of it in laboratories, and refusing to provide live samples to international scientists who were working on a vaccine. This is an excerpt from Five Eyes Intelligence Alliance dossier. Your take on that?
So I think we're going to find out a lot more about that. And to me, this goes back to that whole discussion of what is our relationship vis-a-vis China. And of course, we could see their true colors in terms of how they operate as state capitalists, with all the issues of what they were doing with trade. The president's been vying against them. Finally, we were getting them to come around. This is an indication of what you're dealing with when you've got the Politburo, when you've got state capitalists. Information is not free. It's not transparent. And, there's been discussions of being punitive. I would settle for just be honest. Tell us what happened. Show the world that you're going to be a little different going forward, because to me, China is going to pay the biggest price from what's happened with the coronavirus, because it's on top of bad behavior as being a world economic power to boot.
Yeah, and they should. I mean, state capitalist is synonym for communist. They're covering up their own tracks because they know where this came from and they don't want to answer to it. Senator, thank you so much for your time this morning. Appreciate it. Great stuff.
Thank you.
You bet.